Let me tell you something the mainstream media won't. Atheists aren't what Ann Coulter claims they are. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how one of conservatism's most famous voices has created a fictional version of atheism that serves her narrative, but collapses under scrutiny. Have you ever wondered why some conservative commentators seem absolutely obsessed with painting atheists as the ultimate threat to America? I'm going to show you how Ann Coulter, yes, the Ann Coulter, has built an entire rhetorical framework around misrepresenting what atheists actually believe. Here's my bold claim. Ann Coulter has systematically constructed a strawman version of atheism that bears little resemblance to what most atheists actually think. And my most compelling evidence: her own words contradict themselves when examined closely. In the next 20 minutes, I'm going to walk you through Coulter's most shocking statements about atheists, compare them to actual data about atheist beliefs, reveal the rhetorical techniques she uses to distort reality, and finally, explain what this means for honest discourse in America. Whether you're religious, atheist, or somewhere in between, understanding these tactics will make you immune to this kind of manipulation in the future. What liberals don't want you to know is that atheism isn't simply a lack of belief in God. It's a political movement with an agenda. At least, that's what Ann Coulter would have you believe. In her book Godless, The Church of Liberalism, Coulter writes, and I quote, "Liberalism is a comprehensive belief system denying the Christian belief in man's immortal soul. Their religion holds that there is nothing sacred about human consciousness. It's just an accident no more significant than a burp. But wait, it gets better." In a Fox News appearance promoting the book, she stated, "Atheists hate God and want to punish anyone who believes in him. They're responsible for more deaths in the last century than all religions combined throughout history." These aren't isolated comments. In a 2006 interview with CNBC, Coulter claimed, "The atheists have been using the courts to attack Christians for decades. They're the ones who took prayer out of school, 10 Commandments out of courthouses, and are now trying to ban Christmas." And at a conservative political action conference, she received thunderous applause when she said, "Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other." The Founding Fathers knew atheists couldn't be trusted with freedom. Now, before I completely dismantle these claims with actual facts, something the media seems allergic to these days, take a second to hit that subscribe button. YouTube's algorithm hates videos that challenge popular narratives. So your subscription is the only way to ensure you get notified when I release new content that exposes these kinds of distortions. And believe me, I'm just getting started. But here's where things get truly shocking. Later in this video, I'll show you polling data that completely contradicts Coulter's characterization of atheists. The numbers are so dramatically different from her claims that you'll wonder if she's talking about a completely different group altogether. And in a way, she is. Let's establish what atheism actually is before we go any further. As I documented in my extensive research, and the media completely ignored, atheism has a precise definition that's remarkably simple: the lack of belief in any gods. That's it. Full stop. It's not a political position. It's not a moral framework. It's not a comprehensive worldview. It's simply the absence of belief in deities. An atheist can be conservative or liberal, capitalist or socialist, moral or immoral, just like religious people. But what about all those militant atheists Coulter talks about? Here's what they're really hiding: the distinction between atheism and anti-theism. Atheism is simply not believing. Anti-theism is active opposition to religion. They're not the same thing, and conflating them is either intellectually dishonest or embarrassingly ignorant. And here's another crucial distinction the left-wing media never makes: atheism versus secular humanism. Secular humanism is an actual philosophical worldview with positions on ethics, politics, and human nature. Many atheists are secular humanists, but not all. And many secular humanists hold views completely at odds with the caricature Coulter presents. Now, let's look at some actual numbers. According to the Pew Research Center, hardly a right-wing organization, but they do actual research, approximately 4% of Americans identify as atheists. Another 5% identify as agnostic. Together with the nothing in particular group, the religiously unaffiliated make up about 26% of Americans. But perhaps the most interesting statistic, and one that completely undermines Coulter's narrative, is the political diversity among atheists. While it's true that atheists lean Democratic, a significant minority identify as Republican or Independent. According to data from the American Values Atlas, about 14% of atheists identify as Republican, and 43% identify as Independent. One of Coulter's most persistent claims is that atheists lack a moral foundation. In her worldview, without God, there can be no morality. As she put it in a 2018 interview, without God, all morality is mere opinion. Atheists have no basis for saying murder is wrong beyond their personal preferences. This argument might sound compelling if you've never actually spoken to an atheist or read any moral philosophy written in the last 200 years. But it completely falls apart under scrutiny. First, if morality comes exclusively from God, then how do we explain the fact that deeply religious societies throughout history have endorsed practices we now universally condemn, like slavery, human sacrifice, and the subjugation of women? Were they misinterpreting God's commands, or has morality evolved independently of religion? Second, numerous studies, which the mainstream media conveniently ignores, show that atheist-majority countries like Denmark, Sweden, and Japan have lower rates of violent crime, teen pregnancy, and corruption than more religious nations. If atheists lack a moral compass, shouldn't these societies be collapsing into chaos? But there's an even more devastating problem with Coulter's argument that I'll reveal later in this video. It involves her own inconsistency when discussing the relationship between religion and government. The contradiction is so glaring that it undermines her entire position on atheism and morality. You'll want to stick around for that. Now let's address what Coulter and others call their trump card: the claim that atheist regimes in the 20th century killed more people than religious conflicts throughout history. Here's what they're really hiding. This argument commits a basic logical fallacy by confusing correlation with causation. The totalitarian regimes of Stalin, Mao, and Pol Pot didn't kill people because of atheism. They killed people because they were totalitarian. These regimes didn't massacre millions while shouting, "There is no God." They did it while shouting, "Long live the revolution," or "Long live the great leader." These regimes replaced religion with personality cults that functioned exactly like religions, complete with unquestionable dogma. Sacred texts, infallible leaders, heresy trials, and purges of non-believers. They weren't examples of atheism run amok. They were examples of how quickly humans can create new religions, even when they reject traditional ones. If you're finding this analysis valuable, take a second to hit that like button. It helps signal to YouTube that substantive content deserves promotion over emotional clickbait. And drop a comment below with your thoughts. I respond personally to the most thoughtful ones, even from those who disagree with me. But there's something even more intellectually dishonest about Coulter's atheist regime's argument. She conveniently ignores the fact that many of history's most horrific atrocities were committed explicitly in the name of religion. The Crusades, the Inquisition, the European wars of religion, and numerous genocides throughout history were carried out by people who explicitly claimed divine sanction. I'm not saying religion caused these atrocities any more than atheism caused communist purges. I'm saying that human tribalism, authoritarianism, and the desire for power are the real culprits in both cases. Coulter knows this, but admitting it would destroy her neat narrative about godless liberals. Let me pause here and get a bit personal. I understand why this rhetoric about atheists being immoral resonates with many people. I grew up in a deeply religious household myself. When I first encountered atheists in college, I was genuinely concerned about their moral foundations. How could they be good without God? What stopped them from committing horrible acts? But then I actually got to know them. I discovered that my atheist friends were just as moral, sometimes more moral, than my religious friends. They donated to charity, volunteered their time, and lived according to strong ethical principles. They simply derived those principles from human empathy and reason rather than divine command. This personal experience forced me to reconsider my assumptions. And that's something I wish Coulter would do, actually engage with real atheists rather than the strawman she's constructed. Now let's examine Coulter's claim that our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people, and that the Founding Fathers knew atheists couldn't be trusted with freedom. This is a perfect example of how Coulter manipulates history to serve her narrative. The quote about a moral and religious people comes from John Adams, but Coulter conveniently omits the context and misrepresents its meaning. Adams was discussing the importance of public virtue, not making a statement about atheists being untrustworthy. In fact, several founding fathers, including Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, and Thomas Paine, held religious views that would be considered shocking by today's conservative Christians. Jefferson created his own version of the Bible by literally cutting out the supernatural elements. Franklin described himself as a deist who doubted Jesus' divinity. And Paine wrote scathing critiques of organized religion that would make modern atheists blush. But the most damning evidence against Coulter's claim comes from the Constitution itself. Article VI explicitly states that no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust under the United States, and the First Amendment prohibits the establishment of religion. If the founders truly believed that atheists couldn't be trusted with freedom, why would they explicitly prohibit religious tests for public office? The answer is simple. They didn't share Coulter's views on atheism. But there's an even more fascinating contradiction in Coulter's position that I'll explore shortly. It involves her simultaneous defense of religious freedom and her apparent desire to impose Christian values through government. The mental gymnastics required to maintain these contradictory positions reveal the fundamental weakness in her entire approach to atheism. Now let's examine the rhetorical techniques Coulter uses to misrepresent atheists. Understanding these techniques will help you recognize them not just in Coulter's work, but in political discourse generally. First, she employs what rhetoricians call hasty generalization, taking the most extreme examples of a group and presenting them as typical. She focuses on provocative anti-theists like Richard Dawkins or Christopher Hitchens, rather than the millions of ordinary atheists who simply don't believe in God but have no interest in attacking religion. Second, she uses association fallacy, linking atheism with other positions she opposes, like communism or progressive politics, even though these connections are incidental rather than causal. It's like claiming all Christians support the Spanish Inquisition, because both involved Christianity. Third, she engages in appeal to fear, suggesting that atheism leads inevitably to moral collapse, societal decay, and totalitarianism. This activates the amygdala, the brain's fear center, making critical thinking more difficult. Fourth, she employs false dichotomy, presenting only two options when many alternatives exist, including moderate forms of both religious and secular worldviews. If you've made it this far, you clearly care about intellectual honesty in our public discourse. Make sure you're subscribed and have notifications turned on, because my next video will expose how these same rhetorical techniques are used to misrepresent other groups in our increasingly divided political landscape. You won't want to miss it. Now, I promised you a revelation about Coulter's inconsistency, and here it is. Coulter simultaneously argues that 1, morality can only come from God, and 2, the Founding Fathers created a brilliant constitutional system based on natural rights and limited government. But here's the problem. Many of those founders explicitly based their political philosophy not on divine revelation, but on Enlightenment principles of natural law discernible by human reason. In other words, the very constitutional system Coulter defends was significantly influenced by the same rationalist, Enlightenment thinking she condemns when it leads to atheism. She wants to claim the American founding as exclusively Christian, while ignoring its deeply Enlightenment character. This contradiction exposes the fundamental weakness in her entire argument against atheism. She's not actually concerned about the source of morality. She's concerned about maintaining cultural Christianity as a political force. Let's talk about what Coulter and others like her are really afraid of, the true diversity of atheist thought that defies their simplistic characterizations. As I documented in my research, and the media completely ignored, atheists span the entire political spectrum. There are conservative atheists like S.E. Cupp who oppose abortion and support traditional values, despite not believing in God. There are libertarian atheists who want government out of both the bedroom and the boardroom. There are centrist atheists focused on practical problem solving rather than ideology. Even on social issues, atheists are far from monolithic. According to data from the Pew Research Center, while atheists generally lean left on issues like same-sex marriage and abortion, there's significant diversity of opinion, particularly on economic issues, foreign policy, and the proper role of government. This diversity completely undermines Coulter's attempt to equate atheism with a particular political agenda. The only thing all atheists have in common is not believing in gods. Everything else, political views, moral frameworks, cultural attitudes, varies widely. And here's something I rarely admit in public. I understand why some religious conservatives feel threatened by increasing secularization. When you've built your entire worldview around certain religious principles, watching those principles lose cultural influence can be genuinely frightening. But that fear doesn't justify misrepresenting those with different beliefs. It doesn't justify creating strawman versions of atheism that bear little resemblance to what most atheists actually believe. And it certainly doesn't justify the kind of rhetorical techniques Coulter employs. So why does all this matter? Why spend time analyzing Coulter's misrepresentations of atheism? It matters because honest discourse is essential to a functioning democracy. When public intellectuals like Coulter systematically misrepresent the views of millions of Americans, they poison the well of public discourse. They make it harder for people of different beliefs to understand each other, to find common ground, and to work together on shared problems. It matters because these misrepresentations contribute to the demonization of atheists, who remain one of the least trusted groups in America. Studies consistently show that Americans are less likely to vote for an atheist candidate than a candidate from almost any other demographic group. This prejudice is fueled by precisely the kind of mischaracterizations Coulter promotes. And it matters because the techniques Coulter uses against atheists are the same techniques used to misrepresent other groups throughout our political landscape. Once you recognize these rhetorical strategies, you'll start seeing them everywhere, in how the left characterizes the right, how the right characterizes the left, and how various factions within each coalition characterize each other. I'll confess something else. I've been guilty of these same rhetorical sins in the past. I've taken the most extreme examples of my opponent's views and presented them as typical. I've used association fallacies and appeals to fear. I've set up false dichotomies. But I'm trying to do better, to engage more honestly with those I disagree with. And I hope this video encourages you to do the same, regardless of your religious or political views. So what's the simple truth the left can't handle? It's that atheism isn't a monolithic political movement with a shared agenda beyond not believing in gods. It's that atheists derive their moral values from the same sources religious people do: empathy, reason, cultural traditions, and concern for human flourishing. It's that the American constitutional system was influenced by both Christian and Enlightenment principles, not exclusively one or the other. And perhaps most importantly, it's that we can disagree about the existence of God without demonizing each other or resorting to the kind of rhetorical techniques Coulter employs. If you're religious, I encourage you to get to know actual atheists rather than relying on Coulter's caricatures. You'll likely find that while you disagree on theological questions, you share many values and concerns. If you're an atheist, I encourage you to recognize the diversity within religious communities and avoid the same kind of generalizations Coulter makes about you. And if you're Ann Coulter, well, I encourage you to engage more honestly with atheist thought. You're welcome to criticize atheism as a philosophical position. You're welcome to make the case for Christianity. But please do so by addressing what atheists actually believe, rather than constructing strawmen that are easy to knock down, but bear little resemblance to reality. Because in the end, what strengthens America isn't religious uniformity or the demonization of those with different beliefs. It's our ability to come together despite our differences, to engage honestly with each other's views, and to find common ground wherever possible. And that's a principle I hope both religious and non-religious Americans can agree on. If you found this analysis valuable, please hit that subscribe button and share this video with others who might benefit from it. And stay tuned for my next video, where I'll be examining how these same rhetorical techniques are used to misrepresent other groups in our increasingly divided political landscape. Until then, I'm your name, encouraging you to think critically, engage honestly, and never stop questioning the narratives you're presented with, including mine. Thank you for watching,